The discussion will be moderated by Mr. Jeprison, who is both the chairman of Board of Governors of American Chamber of Commerce in Korea and attorney of Kim And-jang. Mr. Jens, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, MBN and Seoul City, for organizing this great event. We appreciate everybody in attendance online and with us here today. And thank you for being here, Magnus and Stephen, for your great address. We appreciate that. And we have Saeed Amidi, who's the CEO and founder of Plug and Play. And Saeed, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Stephen, you gave us a good introduction to the ecosystem and what's happening in the world today, what's happening with COVID and the COVID impact. And I wanted to ask you if you see there will be a post-COVID period. And when it comes, we're not sure when that will be, but we're hoping it's coming soon. But what do you see happening in this startup ecosystem in post-COVID? What's going to be the change? What do you see will be the differences in the ecosystem as we come out of this pandemic?
Always hard to start on a negative, but let me do it anyhow. I think we are still scared about the situation in VC, particularly Series A. As I was alluding to the trends post the 2009 financial crunch, we could see that VCs continue to invest during the crisis, but then leveled off as their funds got depleted and they weren't able to get new LPs engaged. That took 12 months. So we are into month 6 or 7 right now. And we are still waiting for this large hit. We haven't seen it as yet as stark as we believe it could come. So that's something we need to deal with. I think it's an important element. Our friends, I was alluding to these great models that have been developed in Tel Aviv, are certainly ones to be shared globally and to be looked at if we want to ensure that we got the funding in place to further build out the upper end of our ecosystem funnels. If you want to see Series A and onward, if you want to see scaling companies, and scaling companies, the scale-up segment is undoubtedly so important for job creation, for economic impact. We need a lot of startups with great ideas, but the economic impact, the job impact, you only get out of the scale-up segment. So that's something that scares us a bit, something we are tracking very closely. We do monthly surveys to really understand what is happening, to pre-warn our network members all around the world. That is a scary one. The positive one, I think we have an unprecedented opportunity to use technology, particularly in deep tech, in new, unprecedented ways. And I was remarking on our friend here, in venture capital partner in Manila, saying these developments all of a sudden are so quick. We are breaking through political issues, inertia, regulatory inertia. All of a sudden, we can do all the things we always wanted to do, but we're never allowed to do. All of a sudden, we can do all of that. And people are working with us from a government side, from a payer's perspective in e-health, as an example. So that's a hugely encouraging message. And I think we are hoping for much more of that to happen. Lastly, we made this little slide, not without reason, this little slide where we said, governments, listen, if you are supporting restaurants, bars, the cultural scene, that's fantastic, and you should be doing it. It's livelihoods at stake. But when you come from an economic perspective, if you're supporting traditional SMEs, and you compare that to startups and scale-ups, please have a look at those, because in the end, this is the way to much more effectively create future jobs and higher qualified jobs for the future.
Yeah. Saeed, let me ask you a similar question. We're focusing on how startups can help lead the economic recovery. As we move through the pandemic, how do you see governments reacting to the startup industry? How are they adjusting their thinking? How do you feel they need to adjust their thinking?
First, it's great to be with you and to answer your question. I would like to clarify that we help startups connect with large corporations and help their digital transformation, innovation, and technology. And I am surprised that the amount of interest we have received from large corporations to embrace these technologies and to implement them faster than ever. You know, we have number of healthcare providers that went from 5 to 7% online assessment of the patient to over 70-80%. And I believe through any challenge there is an incredible opportunity. For sure in our travel and hospitality vertical and in our retail vertical, we have seen a slowdown because the boat industry, if you're not in the food and essential product, have taken a very big hit. But anything that has to do with communication, health, insurance, I am quite surprised. And from my point of view, like one of our startups, Hippo, which is supplementary insurance for your home, just raised $150 million on $1.5 billion valuation. Another startup we have, which is security for personal identity, Onfido, last month raised $100 million. So if I had one recommendation for the entrepreneurs, is you have to work on the products that can have a real value and real results fast. And I think you can get funded. I think, as everyone says, there is a lot of barriers, as Stephan said, like people come together and solve a problem much, much faster than even 6 months ago. And their collaboration between our startups and our, corporate partner has amazed me. So I think there is a challenging times ahead of us, but if you choose the right industry and the right solution, I think is the biggest opportunity for an entrepreneur in the world. And a lot of our startups have pivoted to, address this challenge. They have great technologies and they are focusing it for like e-commerce, communication, health, and etc.
Great. Thank you, Saeed. Magnus, you are based in Singapore, still traveling, fortunately. As you see us moving through the pandemic, we've heard Saeed and Stephan talk about some of the challenges. Where do you see the opportunities for startups in this environment that we're in right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and thank you all for inviting me again. Great to be here. So in Antler, we build companies from scratch. So we very much look at the opportunity space to build new companies. So far this year, we helped build another 100 companies. We made another 100 investments in Europe, in Asia, in the US, in Africa, a couple of other places. And there are kind of two things that we say to the entrepreneurs that we're currently working with. Number one is the opportunity is probably larger now than ever to get off the ground and scale rapidly if you're addressing the right area, right? It was mentioned earlier, but governments is looking at innovation and technology very differently than they did 6 months ago. Regulations is changing faster than ever due to necessity, right? There's a number of things that had to change in terms of remote services and so on. Businesses are open to new ways of working, in a way that they've never been before. And consumers are consuming and living their lives in a different way. And some of these things is a temporary change, but some of this and a lot of it is there to stay. So there's never been, a better time to start a new business because you're seeing decades worth of change in certain industries in a matter of months. So that's number one. The second thing we tell our entrepreneurs is, if you're an exceptional person who are thinking about starting a business and you did that 6 months ago, you kind of had an obligation to do that towards yourself, towards your family, towards your investors, towards the customer that will use the product that you help solving. But now you really have an obligation, I think, towards society to innovate, create value, create those new jobs, because a lot of those jobs that have been lost over the last 6 to 12 months will not come back in the industries they were lost from. They will come back into new industries. So, you have this combination of a tremendous amount of opportunity being there right now with kind of the obligation for exceptional people to take charge and start innovating. So, just encourage anyone who's been thinking about this for years to now take that opportunity to go out there, build a business around solving a real problem, as Draper was talking about earlier, because there are a lot of them out there right now. And, obviously in terms of where the opportunity space is, I think in terms of the, traditional space, which has, gone down a little bit lately, that will come back. There's still a lot of opportunities there. And then obviously within supply chain, logistics, e-commerce, marketplaces, deep tech, health tech, education tech, there are a tremendous amount of new opportunities that have arisen lately that needs addressing, right? I don't think anyone is, fully happy with the services they have within that space now.
Yeah. So there's a common theme I hear. We heard it from Tim Draper this morning in his initial address. We heard it from Stephen, Saeed, and you've said the same. The world has changed. It forced us to change, and many of us are not happy about the change. But as you say, it's a great opportunity. And the issue is finding the solutions to these changes. And if you find the solutions, then you've got the opportunity. Saeed, you mentioned that you've witnessed larger companies who have challenges as well, have been more than eager during this period of time to work with startups, to work with companies. How would you advise a young startup who thinks he has a great idea, who she thinks she has a product that these companies, how do they get into the ecosystem of these big companies?
So let me use a specific example. We feel agriculture and food industry, it is going through a transformation. And more importantly, production of food in a sustainable way. So we help the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, which originated with the top 30 companies in the world. This is like Dow, ExxonMobil, Procter & Gamble. Look at about 1,000 startups in Southeast Asia from our office in Singapore. And we looked at about 1,000 startups with them out of our office in Paris. And then finally from Silicon Valley, which was our launch only 10 months ago, we looked at about 1,000 startups. And in each hub, we have a corporate board of directors that from the 1,000 startups, we bring it down to the top 50. And I was amazed the amount of time and diligence this large corporation spent with the 50, and we reduce it to top 20. And then amazingly, we have more than 50 pilots going on. In the past, if you wanted to get a company like Shell or ExxonMobil or Sinochem from China to think about doing a business with a startup, you would imagine it was impossible. But because they want to end plastic waste, they are much, much more open-minded to evaluate technology, fund these technology, and do what we do and Tim Draper does here in California with software industry, which is, you can build a global company in less than 5 years. And we hope to do the same thing in agricultural business, in food production, and most importantly, in sustainability. Also, the insurance companies, as we run an insurance platform in Singapore and China and Germany, somehow they combine strategy for growth with innovation and digitalization under one roof. And I have seen this happen in the last 6 months with even a company like Nike, that, the whole digital transformation, e-commerce, strategy, growth, it's not Nike, the old Nike that sells through retailers and the digital e-commerce Nike. They all have combined it under innovation, marketing, and strategy. And this is happening at banks, this is happening at insurance companies, it's happening all through different industries because they need to react faster than ever. And I believe startups, somebody mentioned to me, are like speedboats that these big tankers need to maneuver and do a faster job, better job, and cheaper job.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, the overriding theme is startups are nimble and able to solve problems. You've pointed out in your chart on the COVID impact that many startups have, less than 10% had lost all of their sales. A large majority of them had impact, but a lot were growing. And as much as a third of the startups, if my memory is correct, were experiencing growth during this pandemic. What are the sectors where you have seen startups thrive and grow, and where, based on all of the startups that you've been looking at this past several months, where should they be focusing? What problems should they be solving?
The first part of the question, it is the typical suspects we all would expect. E-commerce, e-education, ed tech, advertising tech to a degree, as we need to digitally promote our products. Can't do it physically anymore. In a similar fashion. Cyber, for sure, as we all, as consumers, as citizens, feel more vulnerable. We have evidence of what is happening if cyber goes wrong. I think that's a very good element. Obviously, e-health, at least in some markets. Saying that with a little bit of a constraint, and not as happy as I should be. I believe e-health, telehealth solutions are incredibly important, particularly for developing markets. However, it is this interplay between a government, a payee, and a provider, which in most cases is not optimized or doesn't really work. Again, a view to Southeast Asia. We've had discussions with the Asian Development Bank about 2 weeks ago. There were very upbeat examples where all of a sudden this triangle between government as a regulator, the payee, and the health services as a private enterprise really seemed to be working out. All of a sudden, this is all possible. For years, it was not possible at all. Where else to look? I was speaking about deep tech in a kind of theoretical fashion as a buzzword. But look at the big trends. So we were that scared here in Europe as we couldn't get PPE equipment or even some pharmaceuticals during the crisis, during lockdown out of China. Our supply chains were overstretched. You should have heard the debate here, which was in previous years always about productivity. Where's the cheapest place on planet Earth to get a product and get it here? All of a sudden turning into, do we need to have shorter supply chains? Do we need to produce locally? How can we do that? So advanced manufacturing, robotics, 3D printing, all these solutions that physically help us to bring back production capability are certainly good ones to look at. In general, I think everything under this deep tech umbrella is certainly the winner of this crisis. And I wanted to, if you allow me, just to go back one step to what Saeed was saying about corporate collaboration, because it's not too far. Corporate collaboration in deep tech and startup collaboration seems really important to me. And in the past, I personally have seen a lot of lip service, large corporations, international corporations doing something in open innovation, but not really at the core of their business. When you look into crisis, and I had the pleasure of building a fintech and a robotics accelerator with a number of really large European banks a few years ago, post financial crisis, you should have seen the genuine interest of their CEOs, their COOs in a moment of crunch, to bring new technology, to bring new efficiency, to bring different consumer services to their very traditional banking models. One of the largest banks in the world was part of that initiative. So it's incredible. In a moment of crisis, all of a sudden things go faster, and collaboration is all of a sudden it's very serious. It's part of keeping the business alive. So I think we should interpret all these developments really as an opportunity as we come out of COVID.
Yeah, thank you. Magnus, you surprised us a bit by saying that you're fostering, accelerating more than 100 new companies in the past several months. That's an amazing event. Tell us how you were able to do that in the midst of this pandemic, and what are the trends that you're seeing with these 100 companies?
Yeah, so we literally think that you go through this monumental changes in history, right? And we are kind of going through probably that moment in our generation where you'll see decades worth of change in a short period of time. So we set out, obviously also being our headquartered out of Asia, we saw this happening rather early. So we decided, okay, we're gonna try to be part of the solution here, which is finding even more exceptional people that want to go out and innovate. And that's what we do. So we work on building companies from scratch. So we source potential founders. So we moved a lot of our activities online. We launched what is called Antler Education, Antler launched Academy, so we could do a 5-week pre-program, and the best of those we'd select in and start working with. So our application numbers dropped a little bit in February, March, as the pandemic happened, and then it shot up, and now it's higher than ever. So I think there's a ton of really exceptional people who've been sitting home in the isolation, or they've seen their family business struggle, or they've seen their friends struggle, or they've just had time to think, and they decide, hey, I'm gonna now do that thing I've been thinking about for a very long period of time. I'm gonna leave Goldman Sachs and now build a business, or I'm gonna leave this Spotify and build the next thing. This you've seen happening at a pretty big scale globally. So our applications numbers have gone through the roof. We get about 50,000 applicants per year now of people who want to come to us and build their next business. So we've expanded into Beijing, Bangalore, Berlin, Sao Paulo, and a few other cities. We're very excited about potentially setting up here in Seoul, seeing the tremendous growth in the startup ecosystem here. And the way we do is we select the very best out of these 50,000 people. So we've selected about 1,500 of them that we've now been working with to put together high-performing teams around big problems and big opportunities we see to drive change. And then we expect to make probably around 200 to 250 investments into new companies that have been formed in this way. We support them that with our global network of advisors, so We know people all across the globe, so if we're building something within a specific industry, we think it's important to tap into the world's best competency centers. We have close relationships with people like Plug and Play. So we co-invested together with Plug and Play, came into a number of our companies, and by providing access to competency, capital, if you have exceptional teams then working on solving real problems, that will lead to high-growing companies that will create that value and create those jobs that the world sorely needs right now. So yeah, we just tried to be, I think, part of the path to recovery. I just see this accelerating into 2021.
So it's the pandemic has forced us to think in a new way.
Yeah.
And solve new problems, and we all have them. Saeed, what, as you have looked at the companies that you're helping out, tell us what you're seeing and what you feel is the trend for these new startups. What are the big problems that you think they should be focusing on?
You know, the obvious answer would be health and telemedicine. You know, very recently, one of our startup, Heal, that provides doctors and, practitioners to your home has, doubled and tripled their business in the last 3 to 4 months. Another platform play startup of ours called Health Gorilla, again, and they do work with government, like government of Puerto Rico after the big hurricane consolidated all the population's data, all the hospitals, all the doctors on their platform. In fact, they have one of the best healthcare databases in the world now in Puerto Rico because of necessity. So we feel any business, like you talked about supply chain, we have had Walmart work with us in Bentonville and at the size that Walmart is, they do 10 pilots with our startups every 6 months. And that is not the biggest thing, but they roll out technology faster than ever, because Amazon or other e-commerce sites are, using robotics and using incredible technology to know what the customer needs. So I think, in spite all of these challenges, and I feel is the best time to do a start. And if you already have your core team, which I believe it has to be an engineering team plus a business person, I think it's an unprecedented opportunity. And again, we do a little bit of investment in Singapore, Indonesia, China, but majority of our investments are here in US. And now we are, doing about, I would say 50 investments now in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And again, we little bit slowed down. To be honest, everybody is a little bit more cautious. But I believe this year we will end up with about 200 new investments. We are at around 120 at this time.
That's great. One of the issues that we see in Seoul with the whole startup ecosystem, the government is very proactive in terms of this event by Seoul City. Seoul City has a lot of facilities. They're putting money into it. The central government is putting money into it. But the private sector is a little bit reluctant. Magnus, you are a private sector accelerator. Saeed is the same. And that's what we're missing in Seoul is a lot of the private sector. And what do you recommend we do in Seoul and in Korea to encourage the private sector to be more involved in the startup ecosystem and part of the solution?
I think it's a great question. I think a lot of great things are being done, obviously, already, and it was terrific to be here last year and this year, meeting a ton of people who are working to make that happen. So what do you really need? You need the regulatory ability to come and set up, right? And that needs to be fairly easy. And the easier it is, the more people will come. Secondly, you need to, in our case, and I think for most people who invest in early stage venture capital, you need access to talent. So there needs to be an ability to combine the very best of local talent with importing some great talent that you might not potentially find locally. So, I think some governments have very successfully been able to open up for really exceptional entrepreneurs coming into that country and combining that with local talent. Then you end up building global businesses typically, or regional businesses typically, instead of companies just for that specific market, which is typically what we look at. We look at highly scalable businesses. We typically are less interested in just investing in a company that serves one specific market. So I think that's second, access to talent. Then third, obviously, access to capital. And there, if you, the very best that I've seen is if you combine, pockets of local capital with global capital. And global capital will come once there are great deal flow opportunities, right? And going back to the first point, if regulation doesn't stop you from investing into those very best companies. So I think those kind of three elements are really critical. And if they are in place, you can really act quite rapidly, right? I mean, we set up, for example, in Singapore, it took us 4 months to launch and start building the first 13 companies. And then, now we built 65 companies out of Singapore for Southeast Asia. And I think Seoul really have those components, right? What I think is incredibly exciting here now is, as you mentioned earlier, the governmental support. On the capital side, things seems to be changing now. There seems to be more capital available. I think there's probably more that needs to be done there. On the talent side, it's quite interesting, I think, in Korea in the way that you have that combination of tech talent locally, like some of the world's best technologists and engineers obviously reside there. I mean, both in traditional industries. We were talking earlier about shipbuilding, but obviously also within newer technologies as mobile phones and software and etc. So you have the tech talent, and on top of that you have the ability to build captivating global brands out of Korea, right? From the music industry to beauty to popular culture. To tech companies that are if you look at just the list of the sponsors of this, right, these are world renowned names, and there aren't that many places where you have that combination. So I think if we can just continue to move those other three forward, there will be kind of more and more international outfits like ours coming here, because you very, very seldom have that great combination of talent that you see here.
So Saeed, you have offices around the world where you're looking at startups and helping to generate opportunities for plug and play. What would it take for you to have an office in Seoul?
I believe I was in Seoul in February and had a great event with the two largest financial institutions. And then I had a great meeting with LG and Samsung and the auto industry. Korean culture, like some of the Korean friends I have, I believe they are incredibly incredibly entrepreneurial, hardworking, and there is great engineers in Korea. And the reason why we love to open up an office by January, because the quality of the startups in those two events I saw was amazing. We have had an operation like in Japan for 3 years, and Japanese culture, it's so much structured that the entrepreneurs cannot swim or cannot penetrate the market. But I did not feel that in Korea. I do not feel that in Singapore. So from my 3-4 days in Seoul, I am confident we will have an office there. I am planning to invest in 20 startups per year. And we love to partner with other, VCs. And I mean, like, I'm trying to convince the large conglomerate to open venture arms in Seoul, because they are great, technologies. And, I think that if the top 10 largest groups in Seoul and in Korea open 10 corporate VCs, there will be a lot of action and a lot of return, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And we sort of work with them to do that. We
Yeah.
work with approximately 100 corporate VCs to do due diligence, deal flows, and co-investments together.
Good.
If I could say, if it was not because of COVID-19, we would have opened our office by September, which is now.
Good. Well, we look forward to having you come very soon. Stephan, we've got about 2-3 minutes left. The focus is the recovery from COVID, and I think one of the lessons we've heard in the discussion is find a problem, come up with a solution, scale your solution, and people like Magnus and Saeed will back it with money and get you going. What is your recommendation to young people who are watching you today on how they should think about starting a business, how they should feel about getting going despite the COVID situation we're in right now?
Yeah, I really think it's unprecedented times, unprecedented opportunities, and we've been alluding to the great engineering talent that's coming out of universities and so young people looking at the next career move. So really consider entrepreneurship, find problems that are worth solving in supply chain, in telecoms, in edtech, whatever is relevant to keep us as society working properly, solving a real problem. Try it out. If it doesn't work, pivot, try the next one. I think the opportunity is here. Every crisis, our data show it so nicely. Go into the financial crisis, the moment you start coming out of it, it's the entrepreneurs who are driving the recovery. So the opportunity is here. That's also changing the perception of entrepreneurship. All of a sudden, as an entrepreneur, you're regarded as leading this movement. Like that's an important cultural element that we need to be looking at. Last but not least, I think the crisis might be a great leveler, particularly for young startups when you look for mentorship. You don't need to be in the biggest place in the world. You don't need to be in Silicon Valley anymore. You find mentorship, global mentorship, high quality, very distributed in sectors, in geographies, whatever you need to build your business, and people are willing to give you time and giving back, giving you time. So really tap into this global network. You got the great engineering talents, get the managerial, the scaling talent elsewhere, do it online. It's absolutely possible. And that's a great leveler, and I think that's a good message.
That's a great message, that the pandemic that we are in is a great leveler and is a great leveler of opportunities. We heard from Saeed that he hopes to be making 20 investments in Korea before year end. That is fantastic news. Saeed, we look forward to that. Magnus, you're here doing the same, so you feel a lot of hope for Korea.
Oh, for sure. And we also really want to launch here, so it's just a matter of time. Hopefully 2021 we'll be here. So we're actively talking to some partners there already, and excited to get that going. And yeah, I mean, this is the year, right?
Yeah.
This year, next 6 months, it's so incredibly important to use this momentum to kickstart things. And you know, diamonds are formed under intense pressure. We keep
Fantastic.
saying.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate Stephen for your address. Saeed, thank you for giving us your time. It's been fantastic to having you here. And Magnus, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I think all three of you have given us a message of excitement, hope. I feel a tremendous sense of positivity from what you've heard and what you've given us, from what I've heard. So thank you for joining us. See you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot.
much for having us.
Thank you.
Have a great conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.